create commercial conversations with your target audience more effectively. Today's topic is calculating the cost of inaction. And in a world where buyers have zoned out of sales and marketing messages and sellers struggle to engage meaningfully with their buyers, often for the fear of messing up as opposed to messing out, we discuss what calculating the cost of inaction is and how you might create it yourselves so that you can engage with your audience more effectively. And so my name's Alex Abbott. I'm your host today. I'm the founder of Sapiro, creator of the Conversation Operating System, and I'm joined by these two lovely gentlemen. Who would like to go first?
I will. Hey everyone, I'm Jordan Abbott, the sales poet, should I say. I also...
And you know it.
And I know it, yeah, apparently so. Recently been made redundant from my previous role, so I am a free agent. If anyone knows of any roles or knows of anyone that knows of any roles, please send them in my direction.
Free transfer.
Indeed.
Jensen.
Awesome. Hi guys, Jensen Abbott, BDR at content.ai, and very happy to be here. Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. Cool. So how should we kick this off? Because Jordan, I know you've got a view, let's say, about the cost of inaction and how important it is that we better understand what that means to us as salespeople, especially given the economic climate that we're faced with and the challenge that is creating for us, anyone in sales and marketing for that matter, B2B sales and marketing. But do you want to share your thoughts on the topic with us?
Yeah, certainly. And I'll try and keep it brief because I could talk all day on it. I think there's a couple of things that we need to consider before we do dive in. Initially, the sort of underlying changes in buyer behaviors that have been occurring for, the best part of the last decade, let's say. But more recently, what we've seen is we've gone from a place where businesses were very much in a growth at all costs mindset, where potentially the biggest risk for them was falling behind their competitors. So a couple of other things that play in there is the fact that cash was cheap, interest rates were lower than they are now. VC money was flowing freely. Businesses
after COVID.
Exactly. Businesses were making these sometimes risky investments out of necessity to maintain their growth rate, which would then support or help them to maintain their valuation, which would then help them to raise further capital. So it was this sort of vicious circle, if you will, where businesses were having to make investments in order to sustain the growth and to sustain the valuation. So that was having an impact on the way that the leaders and decision makers and buyers were thinking. It was very much driven towards, okay, well, what's the gap between where we are now and where we need to be? Where's that additional value going to come from? And that sort of led salespeople to create this ROI-based messaging, this value-led messaging. We can provide 4x uplifts, and that was resonating with buyers at the time because that's the way that they were thinking.
Yeah. However, for many years, that insight would land well with buyers.
Yeah, exactly. And it did land well, and that caught on like wildfire, and then everyone started doing it to the point where it started to get drowned out. And what we've seen more recently is, well, I say more recently, trust in salespeople is dropping as a result of this bombardment. So best case scenario, that value-led messaging got to a point where buyers weren't fully convinced, because at the end of the day, we are salespeople. We are quite literally compensated based on how many people we can take to that next step, depending on, what your specific role is within the process. So, best case scenario, they don't quite trust it. more realistically, they just completely drown it out. And the reason being is because those larger changes that have occurred, the economy isn't what it was. There's a gross nervousness about making any sort of investment because businesses are in this sort of wartime mentality where resources are stricken, and it's all too easy for senior leadership to chase the paper trail to whoever signed off on that investment. So no one wants to put their head on the chopping block. And what we're seeing as a result of that, we need to change our messaging. So value led worked because of the way the buyers were thinking. They needed that value. Cost of inaction is more effective now because, as you said, rather than being driven by FOMO, fear of missing out on that opportunity, leaders are driven by fear of messing up.
Yeah. So okay. Just in summary, then we've got the world's B2B salespeople using insight-led messaging that is largely based on how much more successful we can make you.
Mm-hmm.
Businesses are no longer being as successful as they were for a number of different reasons. And so the believability of that insight-led messaging just dropped, and it became noise as more and more people worked harder to throw more insight down people's throats, down buyers' throats. And so we're in a position now where where salespeople, whether you're operating a focused account territory, small number of accounts versus a volume account approach, this messaging isn't penetrating that zone of resistance anymore. And as we've seen and heard from before, Matt Dixon and the Jolt effect, his research has found that ROI isn't enough to make buyers champion that decision to change internally and build consensus with their colleagues to make such a, let's say, quote unquote, risky decision.
Yeah.
Because of the fear of messing up. And so as salespeople dial up the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, all that does is exacerbate or emphasize the feeling of fear that they have inside them. So what you're saying is, okay, so we need to change the messaging around and actually help buyers see the cost of inaction. So by not changing and just accepting the status quo, there is a bigger cost, bigger challenge that they need to consider.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we do it?
It's a really good question. So I think the easiest way to do it is by leveraging existing case studies and reverse engineering them, right? So throughout that value-led era, obviously marketing teams were going hand over foot to try and create these case studies that are speaking to value. We can get you a 4x uplift in this. So the simplest way is just quite simply reverse engineer that. Lead with a question, do you know how much closed revenue you're missing out on? What if I told you you're only reaching a quarter of the potential? Would you be, should I send over a simple calculator to help you actually identify what that cost is? Mm-hmm. Or that was the sort of messaging that I was using.
Okay, but does that not risk the barriers coming up? Oh, calculator! Everyone's got a calculator. How do you?
Yeah, potentially. The way that I was doing it was sending over a video talking through the calculator, and I'm talking this calculator is super simple. It's got their current state, future state, based on some uplifts, and there you are including those stats from the case study. Mm-hmm. Because of course you need those uplifts to calculate the cost of inaction. So what's the difference between your current state and your future state? Of course it's another thing for a prospect to do, but the goal is there to get them thinking. Do you know how much, with a question that's aligned to the way they're thinking, do you know how much revenue you're missing out on. That's on the forefront of every sales leader's mind, I would imagine.
Okay. So case studies are highlighting the potential future state.
Mm-hmm.
What if you had benchmark statistics, like a year's worth of data?
Well, yeah, exactly.
You know where I'm going with this.
I do, yeah.
With what we do at Sapiro, providing a form of social selling and influence, so that the people can create commercial conversations at scale. We've got a year's worth of benchmark data that shows that salespeople can generate conversations with more than 10% of those that they ask within their target audience, and can penetrate their territories 15 times more than using traditional approaches, and engage with 6.4 times more stakeholders within each active account. And we're not even trying this approach yet, as you're talking about, this cost of inaction approach. I'd like you to help me to create that for Sapiro whilst you've got a little time on your hands before you get another job. Cool. Jensen, what are your thoughts on this? You work at an organization that sells a content management system, and your average order values can be 6 figures. So what are your thoughts about what Jordan's talking about?
Sorry, excuse the cat that's now coming to say hello. I feel a bit like Dr. Evil now, sitting here with the cat. No, look, I think it would be very.
It's how you stroke it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it'd be very, very beneficial in the fact that, look, even kind of messaging or emails that I try, I know that value-led stuff doesn't work, because it is exactly the same as what the other 100 people that are trying to reach out to that same person are doing, right? It's the look at
this. When you say value-led stuff, you mean that insight messaging.
Yeah. So I mean, like the statistics.
And what's working for you is a more relationship-first approach.
Yeah, relationship-first approach, but then having this kind of calculation of cost in action, right, would also be would also help, because it would help educate and help them identify where they can make more money and maybe save more money, right? That's what's gonna.
Well, I think the point is, you're shining a light on what happens if they do nothing.
Yeah.
And they decide not to invest in a content management system with the capabilities that your system has, for example.
No, exactly that. And I think it would be great to kind of listen in and see how you two are going to create that for Sapiro, and how kind of you're going to use the data going forward to actually be able to kind of show that to a potential prospect.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very interesting, but also what I can't help with just seeing kind of the banner at the bottom. Are you struggling to obviously engage your audience due to the fear of messing up? And really, I sit there and I think, do you know what? I would rather mess up than miss out. And there's a reason for that, because I don't think people would mess up, right? Kind of, you don't really fail, right? You learn.
Well, you're talking about yourself as the individual. Now put yourself in a business where messing up costs you your job and your credibility across, a dozen peers within that organization. And that's what we're talking about when we say, people have a fear of messing up, because if they make the wrong decision, that could make many people's lives.
Okay, I've got a question then.
Yeah, we've got 1 minute left.
Just quickly, very quick. How would you, or what would be your opinion to combat that? Could it also be maybe, I don't know, would it be maybe changing something from the top down to actually allow for people as being human? That, I don't know. I don't know where I'm trying to go with this question. I'm trying to think, how would you maybe then combat that?
Yeah, well, I know where you're coming from with that question. You're coming from a place of sales, and wanting to allow salespeople to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. What we're talking about here is very, very different. This is people these are buyers within organizations that we're typically selling to, that are in a position of responsibility, and they need to make a decision that is right for the business and either the growth of the business or to protect the profitability of the business. And that's normally a decision that includes 6, 8, 12 or more people influencing that decision.
Yeah.
So if you mess up in that scenario, you don't get an arm around the shoulder and say,
Yeah.
"Oh, what did you learn from that?"
Yeah.
You probably lose your job.
Yeah.
But anyway, just moving on, Jordan. I think can you help wrap us up? What are the 1 or 2 things that you would tell to salespeople thinking about how to bring to life this idea of cost of inaction?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to a passage that I read in the Challenger sale, and it was surrounding the most beneficial outcome of any meeting, rather than a prospect, totally agreeing with you or totally rejecting your thoughts. You want an moment. You want to get them thinking in a way that potentially they haven't thought about before. And I think this is where the value of cost of inaction comes from, because they're likely thinking along those tracks, and you want to align the thinking. But if you can bring to light something that they potentially wasn't aware of prior to that message, then you've struck gold. As I mentioned, the easiest way to start thinking in this way is to reverse engineer any case studies that you have available and start building messaging around that. So that's the key takeaway. And it is, as I said, reverse engineering the value to try and identify where that cost of inaction or missed opportunity cost lies for your prospects.
Brilliant. And as I said, I'm going to pin you down to help me calculate the cost of inaction.
Indeed. Shameless plug. I am on a session on Sales TV next week to go into a bit more detail on the topic. So feel free to join me there.
Yeah, good point. You'll be appearing as a guest on Sales TV on Tuesday morning, 8:45 a.m. UK time, where Andy Huff, chairman of the ISP, and Adam Gray will be grilling you a little further. So I'm going to look forward to that session. Thank you, guys, for your contribution today. Thank you to everyone that is listening. This is Walking Digital Corridors, and the episode is calculating the cost of inaction. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on Walking Digital Corridors.